So in a standard microeconomics class, you study all kinds of situations where people have to make the best choices. And so in standard microeconomics, people are trying to optimize some kind of situation. A producer is trying to maximize their profit, or a consumer is trying to maximize their utility. And so overall, micro studies how people make choices. And for most of a microeconomics class, you focus on somebody trying to make the best choice they can, and that's the end of it. Game theory looks at special types of situations where it's not just one person making a choice. Game theory focuses on situations where people make choices when those people know that their choices are going to affect other people's choices. It's going to cause a reaction, in other words. Game theory is the study of interdependent choices. In this video, we're going to focus on one area of game theory that sometimes we'll call a principal-agent model, or sometimes people will think about this as the type of things that can happen when you enter into a contract. What are some of the problems that can happen? So some examples of game theory, just generically, would be instead of just going to a store where there's a price on the product, what if you had to haggle over the price of a product, as you normally do when you have to buy a car? What if governments want to deter crime in a neighborhood? What's going to happen if they put more police in a neighborhood? Well, that might reduce the crime in that neighborhood, but what's the reaction going to be? Well, perhaps criminals just move to a nearby neighborhood, right? Action, reaction is the name of the game, and so we have to think about what's the best thing to do given that there's going to be a certain reaction to our choice. We could think about the choice of offense and defense in football. What the team with the ball has, their best choice is going to be determined by what the defense is doing at that same time, right? And so it's action, reaction, action, reaction. Or you could think about two different kinds of stores, Walmart and Kmart, or Walmart and Target. If Walmart places a store in a certain neighborhood, how might that affect the location decisions of other stores like Kmart or Best Buy or Target? So let's look at these kinds of models that we call principal-agent models. In this kind of situation, I think about it as being a principal. This is somebody who is trying to contract with someone to do something. The agent is somebody who's going to respond to the offer of the contract, or think about it as the person who would sign the contract. So we can think about these as where a principal writes a contract and wants to enter into a contractual relationship with an agent. Two really common examples that we'll talk about are an employer. They'd be the principal. They write the employment contract and they want to hire some employees. They would be the agents in this context. Or an insurance company. They might be the principal. They write up the terms of the health insurance contract or the life insurance contract or the automobile insurance contract, and they're looking for some customers who would be the agents. Now, I put question mark here after principal and agents when we're thinking about insurance because this actually can go the other way. Suppose I'm looking for a health insurer. So I'm a human being, a customer, and I'm looking to contract with an insurance company who's going to cover my health needs, and when I need them, I want them to be there. Sometimes you can reverse these roles. Most of the time, the principal is the one who's looking to get something done, and the agent is the person that you expect to perform or do something, right? So you could sometimes flip these up. The two main types of principal-agent problems that we like to talk about are adverse selection and moral hazard. I like to think about adverse selection and moral hazard a little bit differently than many textbooks. It all boils down to being the same thing. So the way I talk about it will add to your knowledge. It's not going to add to your confusion. If you think about the types of problems that could happen before you sign a contract with somebody, problems with who decides to sign up for your contract, these are things we call adverse selection. And adverse selection usually has to do with hidden information. Information that the principal doesn't know, but the agent does know. So these are adverse selection problems. Adverse selection, the word adverse means bad or not the best. Selection, kind of person. Adverse selection has to do with entering into a contract with people who aren't the real best kind of person that you would want to enter into a contract with. Behavior after a contract has been signed usually we'll call the moral hazard kind of problem. Moral hazard means people might not act in the principal's best interest. The agents might engage in behavior that harms the principal. So these are problems with how people behave after the contract has been entered into, and these are usually due to hidden actions. The agents are doing something, behaving in a way that we can't see, and that's really what brings the problem about. Let me give you a couple of examples here. There's a famous example called the lemons problem, and this was studied by a guy named Akerlof. He won the Nobel Prize in 2001. He actually shared the prize with some other people for this kind of idea. Let's do an experiment. Suppose we know out there that there are a bunch of used cars of all different kinds of quality. To make this really simple, to use small numbers, let's suppose that all these used cars on average are worth $50 a piece. I know, small numbers just to keep it easy to talk about. Not all cars are worth $50 a piece, right? Some will be worth less, some will be worth more. So there are going to be some cars worth $100, some worth $90, $80, $50, $40, $10, $20, and some used cars out there may actually be totally worthless, worth zero, right? Here's the problem. There's no way for you to truly know the value of a car because the person selling the car is going to have more information about that car than the person buying the car. So what kind of problem is this when one person has more information than the other? Right, this is going to be an adverse selection kind of problem. There's hidden information. The person who's been driving the car for the last 5 or 6 years really knows the details. Does it not run very well when it's cold? Does the transmission all of a sudden just not work on some days, right? That's going to be hard for the buyer to find out. So in this case, we'd think about the person who wants to buy a car being the principal and the agent being the potential sellers of the car. And the hidden information about the car is the problem here. So suppose all these cars look the same to us. We don't know much about cars, and we just can't tell. What would the price of used cars be in this market? Well, let's suppose, just to start, that the equilibrium price of cars was $50. Question number 1. Who's going to be willing to sell their car if the equilibrium price today is $50? Some of these people have cars that they know are worth more than $50. Are they going to be willing to sell for $50? Probably not. How about these people who have cars that are worth less than $50? Are they going to be willing to sell their car for $50? Absolutely. Once you start to see that the kind of person that is going to be willing to sell their car when the price is $50 are all the people who have cars worth less than $50, is the price going to stay $50? If you were out there looking to buy a car and you knew that all the cars that are for sale are actually going to be worth something less than $50, 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, maybe you're lucky and there might be a car out there worth exactly $50, but you're going to pay $50 and you have a random shot at getting something worth between 0 and $50. Are you going to really be willing to pay $50 then? Probably not again. The problem in this market is if there's no way for buyers to be able to know what the car is truly worth, then whatever they're willing to pay, They know that they're going to get ripped off. They know they're only going to be able to buy a car worth less than what they're willing to pay. And so they know, what's the car really going to be worth that I'm going to end up getting? Maybe half of what I pay for it. This is going to cause this market to disappear. It's going to cause this market to not exist if all the buyers are almost guaranteed to get something worth a lot less than they pay, right? So again, this kind of game theory problem would be a problem of adverse selection. And so adverse selection, you can think about it as what we said before. It's the kind of problem where there's hidden information. This is the kind of problem with who shows up to engage in the contract. So it's when a contract attracts the worst kinds of customers or causes the wrong kind of people to respond to a contract from the principal's point of view. Let's think about another example, this time involving insurance markets. Suppose you did a study finding that the average house in the area where you were thinking about doing business was worth $100,000. And suppose that 10% of houses are totally destroyed in any given year from flooding. You do some quick math. Well, if we have a bunch of houses and they're all worth $100,000 and 10% of these houses get washed away due to flooding every year, then on average, per house, I'm going to be experiencing $10,000 in losses if I offer flood insurance, right? So if you open an insurance company and you sell flood insurance to anyone who wants it for $20,000 per year, are you going to get rich? The answer is no. Now, why is that the case? Question number one. Who would be most likely to buy this flood insurance? Remember, on average, houses are worth $100,000, and on average, 10% of houses get washed away. So what kind of house might you live in where you would be really interested in buying this insurance for $20,000 per year? Two kinds of houses. Number one would be a very expensive house. Suppose you lived in a tiny little shack, and this little shack you lived in was only worth $15,000. Are you going to be willing to pay $20,000 per year to insure it? Probably not. Can you think of any other characteristics of this house that would make you more likely to buy insurance? Houses that are right next to the river, right? Houses that are much more likely to flood. So houses in the floodplain right by the river. So who are you going to actually be selling flood insurance to? The $1 million houses that are more likely than 10% to flood. So if that reasoning is valid, our costs are probably going to average more than $10,000 per house and probably more than $20,000 per house. This problem that we're talking about here sounds pretty similar to the lemons problem, actually, right? No matter how much we pay for a car, we were pretty sure we were going to get less than what we paid for with the car. With this insurance, no matter what we charge people, the more we charge, we're going to be getting people with more expensive and more expensive houses and higher risk categories that will be the only ones who want our insurance contract. Let's think about a life insurance contract instead of a flood insurance contract. What kind of person would be most likely to want to buy a life insurance contract? And again, here, we're not thinking about anything fancy. Suppose I just put an ad in the paper and said, hey, you give me $100,000 a year. If you die, I'll pay you $1 million. What kind of person would be most likely to take me up on that deal? Old people or sick people would probably be more likely to want that insurance policy. So when the terms of the contract are more likely to bring in a bad type, adverse selection of people who are more likely going to be the ones who want to sign your contract, This is adverse selection. So it's the idea that sick people are more likely to want health insurance, people with bad teeth are more likely to want dental insurance. The way you write a contract can affect your selection of customers in an adverse or in a bad way. All right, let's think about a different example here. Tax collecting in ancient Rome, Greece, and Turkey. Think about thousands of years ago. You're the ruler of an empire. You send your army out, you conquer some territory. Back in these days, there were no accounting records of these countries. Taxes were collected for large empires. The communication was slow. The ruling parties in this empire probably have never even been to many of these countries where they're trying to collect taxes from. So suppose I'm the ruler, and I send someone from Rome out to collect taxes in Persia. What might happen? Well, this tax collector goes out to Persia, and he gets there and he collects taxes, and he says, you know, how is the ruler going to know that I took some of this money and kept it for myself? The answer is he's probably not going to know, right? These people are going to be skimming off the top. Can you think of any solutions to this? Common solutions people would suggest. Number one, send somebody to monitor the tax collector to make sure that they're honest. Now, this kind of thing actually happened historically. Rome, Greece, Turkey, these empires from many, many years ago would send people to go watch the tax collectors and report back. Suppose I'm the tax collector. Can you think about a way around this? Go find the person who looks like they're newly in town from your empire, have dinner with them, figure out that they're the monitor, and pay them off. Offer them twice as much money as the emperor is paying them to watch you. Cut them in on the action a little bit. What's the solution then? Hire somebody to monitor the monitor. In some of these empires, there were 5, 6, 10 levels of monitors. One person to watch the tax collector, one person to watch the monitor, one person to watch them, and so on. Eventually, this gets so expensive, and it's still not very effective, that it's not a great solution to this. Another possibility is just to make the punishment so high for ripping off the empire that nobody would dare to do it. Some people will sometimes call this a boiling in oil contract. In other words, you go out there, you collect taxes for me, and if you don't do it honestly, if you give me any kind of reason to think that you're cheating, I'll just kill you. Do all sorts of terrible things. One very interesting solution that many of these countries came up with back then was something called a tax farming contract. Tax farming meant you send your army out, maybe your army has 10 generals. You conquer new territory. After the battle is over, you bring back your 10 generals and you say, hey, what do you think about this new country we conquered? Is this a rich area, poor area, or what? And the generals are like, it was okay. They had some crops and they might have had some silver mining and some other industries that maybe we could tax. Then the ruler would say, okay, we're going to hold an auction. You 10 generals, you've all been to this country. You know how big it is. You saw what was there. I'm going to auction off to the highest bidder right now. Whoever bids the highest will have a contract to go over there, and for the next 10 years, you collect taxes. You keep every penny that you collect, but you're going to pay me my highest bid. And you can make payments in 10 yearly installments if you want, but you're going to own this country. You're going to have the right to collect taxes, but I'm going to be guaranteed that I get my payment based on the highest bidder. And you would sit there and have these generals bid against each other. Highest bidder wins. In that case, the ruler knows how much money they're going to get out of this tax collecting contract, and you don't worry about whether people are ripping you off or not. Kind of an ingenious solution to this problem. Now, what kind of problem is this when I hire a tax collector, send them out, and they steal from me? They don't give me all the money that they raise in taxes. This is an example of moral hazard. So moral hazard is when the agent, so the principal is the person that hires the person to do a job, the agent is the employee. Moral hazard, when the agent can take actions that are unobservable but harmful to the principal. Normally a problem like this is going to happen when you can't monitor, you can't watch what they're doing and check up on them. This tax collection story is an example of moral hazard, of course. The idea is that when you leave somebody alone, you can sometimes expect bad behavior from them. They might be lazy, they might be untrustworthy, they might not do their job because you can't watch what they're doing. You can't monitor their actions. Here are some more examples of moral hazard. A worker might sleep or goof off on the job. You hire a salesperson and they just don't go out there and do the sales calls they tell you that they're doing. How could you fix this kind of problem? Pay people on a piece rate salary. A piece rate salary means you pay people for each thing that they actually produce or make, and you don't pay them a salary per hour, you pay them per shirt they sew. You pay them per contract they get signed or something like that. Another solution, figure out a way to watch the people, like the monitors that the tax collector had watching them to make sure that they were being honest. Or if you're the boss or if you're the manager of a company, go check on your employees. Make sure that they're doing the things that they should be doing. Here's another example of a moral hazard problem. The principal is the insurance company. The agent here are people who sign the insurance contract. They're your customers. But after somebody gets insurance, a common problem that we've seen is that people start to drive more recklessly. Think about how carefully you would drive your car if it was uninsured. You know that if you get into a wreck, all the costs will be paid by you, including you might have to pay the costs of the other person that you hit if it's your fault. But if you're insured, a little less risk. You're like, oh, well, it's not going to ruin me financially if I get into a wreck. I'm not going to pay quite as much attention as I would otherwise. Can you think of any solutions to people not driving carefully because they have insurance? What are some things that are in your insurance contract for the car that you or your family own that make you have an incentive to be a little more careful? One item is deductibles. Insurance companies want to make sure that you feel a little bit of pain every time you make a claim. They're not going to pay every dime of every claim. You might have a $100 or $500 deductible to make sure that you still have that incentive to drive carefully. Another incentive is that if you start to have a lot of wrecks, then the insurance company is going to raise your rates because they know that you're a more dangerous driver, or at least appear to be. And then there's also always the threat that if you get into too many wrecks, they'll just cancel your policy. So solutions for moral hazard: deductibles, raise rates if you see people are not behaving the way that you want them to behave. If they're in this contract with you, for employees, pay people for performance, monitor them, try to give them incentives to do the things that you want. Pay them more when they produce more. For the tax collector, try to give them a commission. The more taxes they collect, the more you pay. But still, that's going to require that you can monitor them, because they can pay themselves more if you really have no idea how much they should be collecting. Here is our last big example for this lecture. This is a true story, and I have true here in quotation marks, because even though I've been told this is a true story, it seems apocryphal. It seems just like it's too good of a story to really be true. But suppose there was a department, and I was told this was an economics department many years ago. There were two types of professors in this department. They all had tenure, which means it was really impossible or nearly impossible to fire them. You had some that were geniuses at this university and some that were lazy bums. The geniuses were bringing in millions of dollars in grants and writing books and doing wonderful research and doing great teaching. The lazy bums were showing up to class late, not really doing anything at all. So if you've got all these employees and there's a policy that says you can't fire them, how could you get rid of the lazy bums? Somebody at this university supposedly came up with a brilliant idea. They said, okay, let's offer everyone. The policy was you couldn't offer a new contract to just some people. It had to be open to all of the faculty in this department. Somebody said, okay, let's offer $1 million to any professor who will resign. The thinking of this person who came up with this plan was, of course, the lazy bums are going to take the $1 million because they're lazy. Maybe they're also greedy then, right? So the lazy bums, they're going to jump at this offer of $1 million. They will leave. That's not what happened. Can you think about what really happened and why? All right, let's think about the choices of these two types of professors. Suppose I'm a genius. I'm already making a pretty good salary. The whole world knows I'm a genius. I'm writing books all the time. I'm famous. I'm bringing in grants. What if I took the $1 million? Would I be able to get another job somewhere else if I resigned from my current job? Absolutely, right? I'm famous and I'm a genius and everyone knows that. So I might take the $1 million and leave and then just go get a better job at a competing university. Think about the plight of the lazy bums. If they took the $1 million and left, would they be able to get a job somewhere else? It'd be very difficult for them to get a new job because they haven't done anything in years, and that's pretty easy to check that someone hasn't been getting grants, their teaching evaluations aren't very good, and they're not publishing any books or any research articles. So in this story, the end result was that all of the geniuses took the $1 million, resigned, and got even better jobs at other universities. All of the lazy bums stayed because if they left, they'd be finished. No one would give them a job in the future. What kind of principal agent problem is this? Is this moral hazard or is it adverse selection? Is it that the wrong type of person accepted the contract? That would be adverse selection. Or is it after these people signed the contract, people didn't behave correctly? Well, in this particular example, we're talking about an adverse selection kind of problem. You offer all the faculty $1 million to quit, and the wrong ones quit, right? In general, if you have a problem that's adverse selection, an adverse selection is usually that you don't know all of the information that you would like to know about potential employees or about potential people that you might offer an insurance contract. What would be the general solution to that kind of problem? The general solution is to acquire information, find out information about people. So adverse selection might be, I'm looking to hire an employee and the people I hire don't have the qualifications they need. I'm looking to hire a professor with a certain kind of skill. The person I hire doesn't have that kind of skill. I'm looking to get people to sign up for my insurance policy, and only the people who live in the floodplains with expensive houses sign up for my insurance company. People who are sick and old sign up for life insurance. People with bad teeth sign up for my dental insurance policy. How can you fix this? Learn information, do your research about people, interview them, check their health, and based on what you learn, adjust the terms of the contract to fit the person. So if somebody signs up for your dental insurance and they have bad teeth, charge them more. If an old sick person wants life insurance, charge them more. If somebody wants to work for you and they don't quite have the qualifications that you need, either don't hire them or pay them less. And how do we solve moral hazard kinds of problems? Again, moral hazard is after I sign a contract, people might start to drive less carefully. People who have my health insurance plan might not take their vitamins. They might not exercise anymore because they know if they get sick and they need hospitalization, the health insurance company is going to pay for it all. It's okay. So why should I use preventative medicine if it's the health insurance company's responsibility anyway, right? Well, the way to fix moral hazard problems mostly is to monitor people. Let's think back to the lemons problem that we talked about at the beginning. That was an adverse selection problem, right? The problem was if you bought a used car, there was a good chance that you were going to buy a used car that was worth a lot less than what you paid for it. How could we fix this? Think about things that we actually do in used car markets. How can you prevent yourself from getting ripped off? Number one, take it to an expert to get the car checked out. If you don't know if it has problems and you just can't tell by looking at it, take it to an expert. So consult an expert. Take it to a mechanic and see if it's a decent car. See what they think it's worth. See what problems they think it has. Which would you be more likely to buy a used car from? Somebody you've never met, a relative, or a local car dealership? A lot of people prefer to buy used cars from name brand big car dealerships. Why? Reputation. If they start ripping people off and they get a bad reputation, they have more to lose than that guy who you've never seen before and will never see again. Other possible solutions here would be things like warranties. Oh, you're worried this used car might have a problem? Okay, I'll give you a 6-month, 6,000-mile warranty, and if you don't like the car, if you find a problem within 7 days, just bring it back and I'll give you your money back, right? So some kind of guarantee like that would help alleviate some of this worry about not wanting to buy something because maybe it's really bad quality and you just don't know. Moral hazard problems, again, monitoring people, or another potential solution would be punishment if people behave badly. We also talked about with moral hazard in insurance markets, co-payments, deductibles, and things like that. So if you keep these two examples in mind, it'll help you remember the difference between moral hazard and adverse selection. Think about employment markets. Before you hire somebody, what you're worried about is adverse selection. How do I hire the right person? After you hire people, you're worried about moral hazard. After they're in my firm, how can I make sure that they're working hard and they're being honest? Similarly with insurance markets, adverse selection is trying to design your insurance policy in a way so that you can attract good customers, or at least the customers that are going to be more expensive, you charge them higher premiums. And then after you get people in your company signing your insurance contracts, moral hazard is the problem that after someone has car insurance, maybe they don't drive as carefully. After someone has fire insurance, perhaps they aren't working as hard to prevent fires in their home anymore. So keep those in mind and think about some other ways that you've seen people prevent adverse selection and moral hazard problems. This is Dr. Berkey signing out. I wish you the best of luck with your studies. Bye-bye.